I drive my bus in a busy city. That's why road safety is so important to me. I know that I must slow down and be extra careful when I make a wide turn. Buses need more room than cars. Everyone can help keep our roads safe. Next time you're driving, remember to give buses plenty of time and space to finish turning before driving ahead. Let's all plan to share the road safely. Learn how at www.sharetheroadsafely.gov.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Need Some Introduction. I'm your host, Victor, and on this podcast, we go week to week, breaking down a streaming favorite. In today's episode, a couple of topics. Primarily, we'll be discussing the penultimate episode of the entire series of The Boys. A very eventful episode, but perhaps not eventful enough given some of the feedback from audiences here so close to the end of the entire series. But before we get to that, I am also going to be breaking down the most recent and truly excellent episode of Widow's Bay, a series that we will probably or certainly be covering in greater and greater detail here on the podcast. Later this week, Sona and I will be breaking down the next episode of Your Friends and Neighbors. We're now just 3 episodes left, I think, in the season. After this upcoming episode, just 2 more. So as May wraps up, we'll have many shows wrapping up. Of course, The Boys. Of course, Euphoria, with 3 more episodes to go. And then a whole slew of new things to discuss in June as well. Plus Widow's Bay continuing to run through all of June, I believe. A couple of quick show notes. We have a Patreon now. Do check out the content there. Do sign up. It is always free. And currently, all the content is free as well. There will always be free content there. But for now, everything is free. And if you'd like to hear Alan and I discuss even more of The Boys, like basically a retrospective of the entire series and this current season up until this point, it's all available there on the Patreon. Alan and I were in the process of going through all of the Christopher Nolan films in anticipation of The Odyssey, and we've digressed here to cover The Boys, but then we will be back onto those Nolan films. The next one up is The Prestige and then The Dark Knight, and we'll continue that once The Boys wrap up. Those episodes also available there on the secondary feed. And of course, our conversations about the first 2 Nolan films in this current main feed. And of course, we've also been discussing in parallel with Euphoria, Margot's Got Money Trouble, the penultimate episode of that series, or that season, I should say, because now they've just announced there will be a second season. Just aired this previous Wednesday. And not my favorite episode of the season, by the way, but I think probably maybe the most emotionally satisfying for most folks. And we've been seeing these interesting parallels between Euphoria and this series. And in the same way that inevitably the fantasy of this situation, which of course is a very dark fantasy on Euphoria, the reality of this world that these women are living in comes crashing down. We have in a much more mundane and realistic version of that same splash of cold water reality setting in for Margot on this series as well. It's been a very good season of the show and very curious how they extend that into a second season. Okay, let's kick things off by talking about Widow's Bay. I broke down in a pretty high level the first 3 episodes of this series of TV, and very easy watch, by the way. So if you're not watching it, if this is the first time you're hearing any one of us bring up the series here on the podcast, it's a very low barrier of entry. These episodes, except for the pilot episode, are about 30 minutes each. There's going to be 10 total episodes of the series. We're getting 2 episodes, by the way, on May 27th, following the holiday. So those may be 2 very pivotal episodes. But all that is to say that if you want to catch up right now, it's going to take about 2 hours for you to catch up. And you may have, if you follow these type of things, seen this nearly unanimous praise for this series. And it did get off, I think, very intentionally to a relatively slow start. The creator of the show was a writer on Parks and Rec, but also a writer or the writer of the Ghostbusters reboot film from 2016, I believe it was. So horror, comedy, and procedural politics may seem like they don't actually go together, but that's exactly what we have here in this series, a sitcom about the mundane and tedious day-to-day operations of a small town government in a town that apparently has every possible type of supernatural creature living within it and curse and you name it. And on paper, that sounds like it should not work at all. And what they have used that to represent here on the show is that really the show can be anything at all from moment to moment. And It's honestly such a pleasure to see it. And this show, the extremely rare occurrence in which every single episode of this show, from one episode to the other, has gotten better and better and better. And the leap in quality from episode 2 to episode 3, 2 was already very solid. 1's already solid. Let me be clear about this. The comedy is very funny, but this transition into the more horrific, but still grounded in this situational comedy of this insane circumstance, but actually now, by the time we get to episode 4, enriching it with the real humanity of these characters, it is doing so many things at the same time. It is truly an impressive piece of work. So this episode, this 4th episode, is called Beach Reads. And I have already brought up the fact that Katie O'Flynn has stolen so many scenes in this show already up until this point, mostly for her amazingly caustic dry wit. And here we have an episode of the show completely or nearly completely dedicated to her POV. We pick up immediately from where we left off in episode 3. The call comes in, this panicked call from the sheriff that something's going on down at the local bar and grill. And of course, that was the cliffhanger for last week, that even as things seem to be going very badly for Tom, and of course, the revelation that the supernatural has completely invaded their world now, something else is going on in town. On top of everything, on top of that, we have something else to deal with. And then we rewind 4 days. And in the flashback, we see Patricia, played by Kate O'Flynn, running a book drive. And one of the donated books is a self-help book called Your Turn, Out with the Old and In with the New, written by Lucy Forbes. Now, I can't remember seeing Katie O'Flynn in anything recognizable, although from looking at her IMDb page, she's had many successful, mostly TV productions in the UK. And movies I've seen, for example, Happy Go Lucky, Mike Leigh's film, apparently she's in that, but that was quite some time ago, so I probably wouldn't recognize her. And in the recent Bridget Jones sequel, something I have not seen, so I wouldn't have recognized her. But most of her work seems to be from TV series in the UK over the past couple of decades, practically. So not something I really recognize her from any of her previous work, but so impressed with her here. And maybe it is with her work with Mike Leigh, giving this kind of very, just where the dry wit comes from being able to walk into a room and absorb the jokes that are being made at her on her behalf in the background, aware of the social discomfort of things. Very much feels like this kind of British kitchen sink type drama. So maybe she brings that to make this so effortless and so lived in. But what an amazing performance she gives in this particular episode. And it makes the whole thing this is what's so amazing to me about this show, is that it has allowed the show to go from slapstick in multiple instances. Even in last week's excellent episode, I think about Tom desperately paddling like a fish out of water on the beach when he thinks he's going to be caught by the sea hag. So overtly slapstick at times, and then being able to balance it with this very painful and awkward character details that we see in this particular episode. And it was cringeworthy, but not like cringe comedy, like so embarrassing, like I make it stop, but truly a sympathetic portrayal of this extremely lonely character, an amazingly lonely character. And you can imagine this exact same circumstance with no supernatural elements, just being this almost like Carrie White, all grown up, having her version of the prom again, and how her vision of this fantasy that's coming true for her and the dark reality. And now that I'm bringing up Carrie, I hadn't even thought about the fact that I've kind of been mapping this New England supernatural storyline to other references. Of course, The Fog in episode 1, the John Carpenter film, not Stephen King related, but there is The Mist, which is a very different type of thing, by the way, but given the supernatural element there. But, The Mist and Stephen King, that one's a little more tenuous. But you think about a town with all its secrets, and then you think about Needful Things. And honestly, all these New England towns with their secrets is basically every single Stephen King story ever told. And then we have the killer clown and that reference to It, the Stephen King, his most popular work, of course. And also staying at the inn and the haunted inn. And that makes you think about The Shining, another Stephen King work. And I don't know if there's any direct Sea Hag reference to anything Stephen King related, but definitely here I'm thinking about Carrie and like Carrie all grown up, surviving some kind of horrible trauma in her youth. And in a way, the chicken's coming home to roost again as she's bullied by these girls she went to school with. But what's amazing about this episode is how they make things a much more complex version of what you would even expect. So she obviously is bullied and embarrassed by these girls intentionally. There's a really horrible scene early on where she's excited to tell the story to this newcomer of how she survived this attack by the boogeyman. So as if things aren't bad enough, by the way, there was a serial killer that killed almost all the girls in her class, or at least a large group of the girls in her class. And she claims that the boogeyman came to her house and she hid under the bed and survived the boogeyman. And as she starts to tell this story, excitedly, by the way, one of the girls who was friends, we find out later, friends with one of the survivors of this massacre, dumps wine on her intentionally to cut her off. And then when she returns to the party after cleaning herself up, now this potential friend she could have made is basically getting a version of the story that humiliates her. Now, immediately, this is a truly fascinating aspect of the story that had right away, the show just had me reeling here at this moment. You have now introduced this serial killer. By the way, I'm just rewatching this show now with my wife. So rewatching all the way episode 1 of the show just last night. And in that episode, she brings up the fact to Tom that she's the survivor of this serial killer and still has the dresser up against her door every day, every night, afraid that he might come back. Of course, Tom, now that we have this context now, 4 episodes later, that Tom's reaction is pretty funny, where he says, come on, if he came back now, you're a 40-year-old woman. Like, he's not interested in 40-year-old women. He's interested in young girls. So you're safe. Exactly what she wants to hear at that moment. Now, still, I do not believe we've ever explicitly seen her in her house putting the dresser at the door, which, by the way, would be an interesting detail if it exists. And maybe I need to rewatch the show again and look for that. But if I have evidence of that, then it would prove that she is telling the truth. And the reason I mentioned that, and I prefer at this moment actually not knowing whether that is true or not, because this is why the episode really made me feel so sad for her, because there's a version of the story where this happened to this girl, and her whole entire life, she has been made fun of for the fact that she tells this story that she was a survivor. And these girls that she grew up with sees her in this way of why did she survive and her friends did not. So that is one version of reality. That's what she's internalized. Why did I survive? The survivor's guilt, basically. There's another version of this story where she is exactly as these women accuse her of later, something that makes this such a much more complex reading of things, where it's so easy to see these women as one-dimensional bullies until her classmate at the party much later in the episode confronts her and says, you want to know why I'm treating you this way? My friend died. That's what she did. She died that night. And you, even then, were so desperate for attention that you lied that this had happened to you too. And her tearful response that it did happen to her is such a tragic moment, of course, because again, did this happen to her and no one's ever believed her? Absolutely terrible. Did she lie about it? She's so lonely that she's trying to make a name for herself that, oh, I survived too. Oh, he came after me too. And rather than that giving her any kind of additional attention, positive attention that she was hoping for, it actually alienates her even more from the population at large. It's so sad. Literally, it is so sad to just try to balance what her psychology is in either one of those circumstances. Either outcome is so miserably sad that it's like utterly heartbreaking. And by the way, that show does this really excellent aspect of making the boogeyman utterly terrifying with just this skeletal definition of what he did, primarily in describing or in their chastising of her that, oh yeah, you hid under the bed. He wouldn't have thought of looking under the bed because all the girls apparently did fight, and all the girls apparently did try to hide. And he had like a supernatural ability of knowing where they were going to hide. One kid, one of the girls, hid in the pool, I think, and he was in the pool waiting for her. So it's almost like a supernatural ability of tracking these girls. So it does make it seem extremely unbelievable that he would somehow have not looked under the bed, if that's all this is true. So I do love how creepy they make this character just the sketched out details of what his mythology is. If I'm going to be critical about anything at this moment in the show, it is that there are so many different aspects. I do hope that they have some kind of holistic framework to fit, not to explain everything. This could just be like some kind of cursed object. This island itself is just a cursed location where it's a hellmouth, to use the Buffy the Vampire Slayer reference. So I don't want everything explained, but I'd like there to be some kind of connective tissue between all these things, because they are really like literally all over the map on these different supernatural occurrences. We have a killer clown, we have a haunted mirror, like all the myths that we saw in the Haunted Inn episode. We have the sea hag, which is now an actual thing. We have a potentially supernatural serial killer in this episode of the show. And of course, the meat and potatoes of this episode, this grimoire, this haunted book that casts a spell over the townsfolk. So there's a lot of stuff going on here. And that's like I said, I do hope that they kind of tie these things together. Oh, of course, the church, the tolling of the ghost bell at the church and what that portends, which we still don't know yet. So a lot of things all going on at the same time, feeling that they're very disconnected. I'd like to have some cohesion to this by the end of the season. So that is my one observation here, although loving the show right now, regardless. Oh, and before we move on to anything else, just talking about this boogeyman for another moment. He's still at large, this boogeyman. So is he still living on the island? Is it someone we've seen here previously? That's one thread to pull on. And on the other side of things, this grimoire itself, this haunted book, who donated this book? I do wonder if the show is going to actually explain that at some point. Was it somebody unaware, just found it in someone's house? Or was someone putting this into her hands intentionally? Oh, and one last thing, of course, is to imagine that this is something that, as she's approaching 40, this is something that happened in the 90s. Of course, around the time of, if you go back 30 years, we're talking about Scream. So not the classic 80s slashers, but we're making a reference to the slashers or the revitalization of the slashers in the mid 90s, thanks to the movie Scream. But again, we're looking at something that happened 30 years ago. So this girl was living on this island at that time and has now grown up living with this shame. And of course, not in a cosmopolitan area where she's meeting new people all the time, but living with the same people who have this same opinion of her whole entire life. So it's like really this weight of sadness and loneliness that she's probably had her entire life, which of course defines her character. And into all this comes this self-help book from Lucifer's book. And after this embarrassing night out, she leaves the party. And again, really sad, she leaves that party acting like, oh yeah, I have something else to do, just casually leaving. And this is a pattern she has repeated her whole entire life, her whole entire adult life. And she goes home and opens the self-help book and asks, what's something you really like about yourself? And she talks about her generosity and her kindness. What's something she really doesn't like about herself? Which is a much bigger, by the way, I love this. It's a much larger area for what you don't like about yourself. She only writes one thing, though. Doesn't take the opportunity of all those extra lines. She just says that she wishes that she didn't care so much about what everybody thought of her. And then we start seeing that Patricia is spending a lot of time reading this book. You can redefine yourself, your whole relationship with your community, if you throw a really good party. Suddenly you become the person who throws really good parties. There's something, again, just in the way they photograph this really mundane book, that there's some level of creepiness to it already. There's some odd details, maybe unintentional, but very well included in the edit, that at one point, like flies land on the book, or a fly lands on the book, and you think about like that, what this book actually represents by the time you get to the end. And things start to become overtly creepy here when we see that the sheriff Bashir is looking for this old woman still Tom's asked him to try to see if he could track her down. Not aware, of course. Tom now we're beyond. He knows full well what that old woman was, but at the time, still just announcing that. And of course, we've traveled back 4 days. And Patricia is somewhere in the town center reading this book. And as Bashir is looking for maybe some old woman just wandering the streets somewhere through the CCTV footage, he notices Patricia sitting there for hours and hours in the middle of the night. So, of course, the experience of her reading the book and what we've seen from her point of view, very different. And of course, she's writing down all these things she needs, all the supplies she needs for this cocktail party. This, by the way, is all going to be, going to have a big cocktail party for the town. And it's actually the cocktails at sunset that Tom, of course, has blown off. And we have scenes here that play out in a very different way when the full reveal comes. But Rosemary shows up as she's preparing for this. She says, "This is very weird the way you're behaving right now. You're putting way too much effort into this. I don't even know half of the ingredients or half of the supplies requested on that list of supplies. And maybe you should wear a different headdress." Of course, her version of this is she's wearing a tiara, which is embarrassing enough, by the way. Why are you wearing a tiara at this cocktail party? It's not like a prom or something. So even when people are saying, like, what's going on? What is she wearing on her head? Even when we hear this later on, we still think it's the tiara. Of course, it turns out she's wearing some antlers from yet another animal that's been butchered for this ceremony that's about to take place. Early on, it looks like this is going to be a true fiasco. There's only one guy there. He's complaining that there's not enough deviled eggs. Deviled eggs, get it, people? Deviled eggs. And this is when she's frantically contacting Tom. There's some very funny details here that she's recruited her coworker, Dale, played by Jeff Hiller, to be the DJ. He doesn't have the paid version of Spotify, only has the one with ads. So ads are playing early on when he starts playing his mix. But eventually things start to come together. And suddenly, just as her friends are about to mock her and leave, the bachelorette party shows up. This is immediately apparently leaving from Tom's house and then coming here. And things start to pick up. It looks like the gravitational pull of people coming to the center of town is working. And before you know it, the bar is packed with people. And things are going beautifully. This is the Carrie reference, right? She's on stage. She's up there speaking to everybody. And it seems like it's working. And this is where by the way, here's where the comedy of the episode still occurs in the middle of this very sad and actually pretty creepy, very creepy episode of the show. Here's where the comedy still works. It's in her frantic need to make this thing a success, threatening to find out, like there's a retirement party happening at the same time, and she has it canceled, or she will take away, like she's using her municipal power here to threaten to take away their liquor license. So the pettiness of her frantically trying to make her party a success, and then her like overinvestment in the night of the party and all the logistics of that, and her fury when people are trying to leave the party, and all of that, very funny, perfect comedic tone management here by the actress. Just an incredible job she's doing here. And then the pivot from the tragic, sad interior performance earlier in the episode to this frantic and desperate need to make this thing work. And then the pivot to her having this perfect day, she thinks, on stage, giving this speech, perfectly calibrated by the actress here. And one more huge comedy here, by huge comedic beat, is the book itself. I love now it's time to serve the punch. Serve the punch. Serve the punch now. This yelling at her from the book, which of course we know at this point that the book yelling at her, there's something wrong with that book. But it's been creeping up on us a little at a time here over the course of the episode. And again, like so many things on the show, earlier on, it's like, is she having some kind of psychotic break? She could just be reading a self-help book and then sitting there reading it all night long and becoming obsessed with this party. It could all be her having some kind of psychological break. And the show, again, gives us that as an option earlier on, only to, of course, prove out by the end that this is absolutely a true supernatural occurrence. I don't even know if the show needs to be coy about this anymore at this point, of course. I do like, by the way, the first time she gets to the page where it's like, serve the punch, she's like, to who? There's like 3 people here, but more and more people show up. Where are the good-looking people? I love that. Where are the good-looking people? Where'd they go? The bachelorette party, of course, livens things up for sure. And then this is where we have that scene, that excellent scene where Patricia's, they have it out. She says, why are you so mean to me? But to this friend of hers or this schoolmate of hers. And then, of course, this whole thing is made more complex by that revelation that why did you survive? So again, why did you survive and my friend did not survive? But more importantly, I don't even believe that you were targeted because those girls didn't survive. If he was coming after you, he would have gotten you. So I don't believe your story. And the sadness of that, of not being believed or being so desperate that you would actually say this story. This is, of course, when the book is yelling at her, serve the punch now. And she does. And things start to go much better. A little David Bowie goes, the party seems to be fully coalescing for her. By the way, just want to put a pin in this. I am pretty sure that next week's episode is about the sheriff. So maybe we flash back some more, find out some more about the sheriff. Just a few details here. He's been talking about wanting to leave repeatedly over the course of the series. We're like, well, can he leave? Because these people are cursed to die if they try to leave the island. But he wasn't born there. He's actually come here for the job. And I'm very suspicious. We always see him talking on the phone, like, come home to me. His wife always asking him to come home. I do wonder if there's some supernatural element to that relationship with his wife. Like, is she even alive? It seems like he's almost like in a bubble every time he's speaking to her. But there is a noise complaint about the party, which seems that it's funny, again, thinking about the context of this after you've seen the episode one time, that it doesn't seem that rowdy from what we've seen. But of course, maybe somebody who lives downtown is complaining that they can hear the party from there. But who knows the sounds that might be actually emanating from that building. And we cut back to what's happening at the bar. Patricia's in all her glory. Everybody's surrounding her, cheering her on. And she's singing, dancing, I should say, to the rhythm of the night. No more ad breaks. Not that we notice anyway. Everything's going perfectly for her because, of course, this is all happening in her head. And then it's time to give the speech, according to the book. And she goes up there and she talks about how every time it's a new time to turn over a new leaf. And it is really a truly beautiful scene. And she is reveling in this. And then this is utterly chilling, by the way. The camera pans across the room, all these smiling faces adoring her. It's exactly what she had hoped would happen. And then we see reflected in the mirror, everyone's just standing there dead-eyed, mouths agape. It's an incredible reveal and just so subtly done just with this one camera movement. Beautiful filmmaking and really just utterly chills down my spine watching this scene from the episode. And after giving her speech, she goes to regroup in the kitchen. And Rosemary, of course, is there. And big question mark here. Rosemary's not affected by any of this. Did she not shrink the punch? She has seen through all of this. She goes, I got to tell you, I don't know what's going on with you. I didn't understand half of the words you just said right now. And you think at this point that she's just still being hard on Patricia. And then the sheriff shows up and is like, what the hell is going on? And then, of course, this is the full puncturing of it. And we see what is actually happening. The self-help book is some kind of Necronomicon. The supplies that she's been chopping up are animal blood, animal parts laid out all over the counter. She's wearing antlers on her head, very Yellow Jackets. And she runs out into the main room again and sees that there's like these Wicker Man like wooden sculptures on everybody's tables. And she runs outside, and very Wicker Man, of course, a giant burning effigy outside. And she has seen by leafing through this grimoire that there's this image of people with their mouths open, drowning themselves, basically. I believe that's what they're trying to do by walking into the water. And that's exactly what's happening. All the party goers are now trying to drown themselves. The sheriff, this is when he frantically makes that call. They need all fire and police assistance. And Patricia tries to rescue these people. So to her credit, she, is not some selfish monster. She actually is trying to rescue all these folks. She grabs the book. She's going to throw it into the fire and can't. They can actually not throw it. This is like now reminds me of Hereditary. So it's like, there's all these different references going on here. And then thrusts her hand into the fire and apparently doesn't burn herself too badly, but the book catches fire. She's able to release it and the sculpture collapses. The people come to, and immediately they turn on her and they're like, hey, someone spiked our punch, which is kind of true, and wander back off onto their own rest of the night. So again, she's completely unappreciated for this. And she walks home completely defeated. But she runs into Tom, and Wick, who are now, all these storylines starting to dovetail now, are returning from his encounter with the Sea Hag in this car. And she just had a horrible day and just wants to go home. But they're like, we need you. So here she is finding this community and maybe even getting closer to Tom, something that she seems to want to have happen, ironically happening because of this recurrence of this curse on the island. And of course, dovetailing more of the storyline here, she gets in the car with them and they go to see the Reverend. And the Reverend has killed himself, but has left some notes. He had left a voicemail apologizing for the evil that's about to be released onto the island. So much more to come regarding that, I'm certain. And that's the episode. It ends on the Rhythm of the Night song again, but absolutely chilling. Just a terrific episode. Again, I think it's the best of the season so far. Oh, a couple of things I want to bring up. I forgot to bring this up in my recap of the first 3 episodes, but the first episode ends with this shot going further and further down. Multiple tunnel systems appears to be going down into. And then at the very bottom, maybe 4 levels down, somewhere on the island, we see, it might be the church itself, we see that there's a chair with straps, like wrist straps, to force somebody to sit in this chair. And at first I thought it was an electric chair, but then the camera pans around and we see that there's giant metal doors that are closed. And presumably these doors will open. So truly maybe some kind of hellmouth situation coming, which is interesting because I literally have a screenplay I worked on last year just for myself that culminates, importantly, with literally like a hellmouth opening under a small town. In that case, it's in the like Pacific Northwest, but regardless, it's just kind of funny that I want to see if some of the imagery I have in my screenplay ends up here at the end of this episode as well. Oh, and one more thing I wanted to bring up is of all these storylines, and I'm sure there will be a flashback episode that fills in the blanks on this for certain, but the one part of this story that continues to be underserved and almost at this particular moment seems to serve no purpose at all is Evan, the son's storyline. I know why he's in the show. Potentially, it's just a device of, he's fighting to save his son's life. He has to break this curse to rescue his son. His son may even be some victim later on or in peril later, and he has to rescue him, like the damsel in distress stereotypically, but the son instead, or some kind of intergenerational curse. So I know why he's there as a device. It's just not working there as a real character, other than being like an annoying teenage kid, another thing Tom has to deal with. But given the stakes have increased so significantly, the younger characters are completely on the back burner here. However, this is a 10 episode series, and I'm pretty sure that we're going to see a lot more about them in coming episodes. All right. I hope you out there are enjoying this as much as I am. A real pleasure, this show so far. And quick 30 minutes, 33 minutes, I think this episode was 33 minutes long. We take away the previously on. I think we're just over 30 minutes per episode. So this is a really fun treat right in the middle of the week. Couldn't ask for anything more. And of course, I am a fan of horror. So if you are, I know some of the audience out there, you guys are not fans of horror. So I do wonder if the comedic blend with the horrific elements is working for you. A lot of folks who watch this or listen to this podcast are really into thrillers, but not into horror. When we do a horror episode, we lose like half the audience. So I do think that there's definitely a differentiation between people who gravitate to thrillers and mysteries versus horror films. So am curious to know whether you guys, this is the right blend for the non-horror folks or not. All right. Now I'm going to dig into that conversation. Me and Alan and I discussing this penultimate episode of The Boys right after this break. All right, Alan, this is going to be on the main feed. You're complaining about that in our Patreon conversation?
Well, no, to be fair, I said I genuinely wasn't sure whether it was like considered a compliment or being sent it off somewhere. And I said that based on where you're pitching to people like, oh, more Alan soon. I was like, oh, I think you tipped your hand that you are rewarding you by putting me on the Patreon. So no, I wasn't complaining. I was just saying I was never quite sure until that moment. So.
I know. I was just teasing you about that. But we'll have this in the main feed, along with an episode where I will be talking about the most recent episode of The Widow's Bay. Did you by chance watch the 4th episode of that?
No, I'm still only seeing one episode of that.
Okay.
But I did like it. I want to keep going, but I
want to specifically call that out. Ian was just emailed me right before this, and he had said, I don't know why the critics are giving this like show such crazy reviews. Like, well, the critics have seen the entire thing. We're only watching it week to week. And he sent this to me after episode 2. And I'm like, episode 2 was funny, but I still thought like it's a pretty low stakes show. I can't believe it's getting this like universal acclaim. We were just talking about Metascores. It's in like the high 80s or 90s in the Metascores. So I'm like, wow, that's very high. And he was commenting on the same thing. I'm like, yeah, I'm just going to wait it out. And it's a unique vibe and audiences seem to be digging it. So I'm going to start covering it on the podcast. But the last 2 episodes, and I won't spoil anything here for you, but the last 2 episodes have been like 2 completely different tones. And last night's episode was such a knockout. I'm like, wow, this show is getting better every single week, which is pretty.
Yeah. Well, I also think I also really like the dry deadpan humor, and I think for a lot of people that will just maybe go over like a lead balloon, and it just won't register with them. So I think it just depends on your personality if you like that type of humor.
Yeah, I honestly thought the show would not be connecting with audiences, but not only have I had multiple people email me and be like, please cover this show. I'm like, okay.
That's
the best. I've very rarely had anyone reach out and say, please cover this show. Maybe the first time, especially multiple people doing so. So that was the first sign that there's something happening. And then I just look at the audience scores.
TV, which, how's that? Especially being that it's on Apple TV, which a lot of people just don't have. So,
well, a lot of people who listen to this podcast do because we cover so much Apple TV shows.
Oh, okay.
So I think
so it's kind of
Apple should be giving me commission by the way.
Right.
But we're here to talk about that show's got a long way to go. Margot's got money troubles is wrapping up next week on Apple TV. So a bunch of things are wrapping up soon. Euphoria's got 3 episodes to go. Also on Apple TV, Your Friends and Neighbors, 3 episodes to go. That one's just starting off. But of course, we're here to talk about The Boys, which have 2 more episodes to go. Actually, after this conversation we have here, this episode, we have 1 last episode to go for not the season, for the entirety of the show.
Yeah, we just did the penultimate or just watched the penultimate. Now we're going to talk about it. Yeah.
So this episode, as far as I can tell, was called, I think when I looked at my Prime app, it's called The Frenchman, The Female, and the Man Called Mother's Milk, which was an interesting title because I guess that is, definitely The Frenchman and the female, which is not the way that I would classify Kimiko, but
that is what they used to call her.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, this is very much like the Homelander's branding of each one of these.
Right.
Which says something, right? That's the title from Homelander's perspective, at least. But before we get into any kind of episode or I should say moment by moment breakdown, what was your general impression of this particular episode?
Well, I was, I'm sort of almost a broken record with this show. I just tend to love it in general. And I really loved this episode. Probably not quite as much as the last one, which I thought was one of the best episodes of the series. But I still thought this was really, really good. The funny thing is, I didn't take too many notes about it because I was watching at work, just trying to hurry up because we're trying to be, very immediate with our coverage. But one of the things, or one of the only things really that I wrote down is once again, I think they're disproving your cynicism tag on the show. This really the main thing that I dinged it for was getting a little maybe too sentimental, borderline saccharine in terms of like repeatedly stressing the idea of hope and having Frenchie sort of unironically use that cliche about like no, I didn't save you, you saved me, kind of thing. So I don't know what you think about that. Maybe it's all a setup to like twist the knife in the final episode, but we'll see.
Right. Well, what I thought was that there's things about this episode that definitely didn't work for me, but the episode did work overall for that very reason. I agree that this show was like really leaning into the relationship there between Frenchie and Kimiko, but it all worked for me. And it's mostly because this actor, I don't always love Frenchie. I don't really always love the performance that this guy.
Yeah, it can be a bit of a cartoon. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why I have a question for you in a moment after giving my idea about that accent. But the Tomer Capone is the actor's name. So I thought he was great in this and really sold that. And of course, like with him being, this is his swan song here.
Yeah.
And I thought he did a great job. And I think all that, as on the nose as it all is, I thought it worked really well. And of course, it is, I mean, it works, I think, thematically. It's like a heroic moment to say that, and everyone kind of concedes this over the course of the episode, right? Whether it's Mother's Milk saying this, whether it's Butcher saying it later on, that it's like, even when it's hopeless, you just fight on, because like, what else can you do? And in this case, a Butcher is just driven for revenge and just like to prove something. And like, he will fight till he dies. It's basically his mentality. But when you see Mother's Milk being like, being kind wasn't a weakness, it made me strong. And then of course, tied in here again, where Frenchie was saved, right? Like you think about Frenchie, and I bought that. Like you said, it's kind of, I agree that like some of the writing's not that, complex, but I really like that. And it really is his character, right? That he,
I don't want to sound too harsh, because I think that he has been one of the weaker characters on the show that I generally love. And that this episode, it was one of his best. What did you say the name of the actor was again?
Tomer Capone.
Okay, yeah, I did think this is one of his best for sure.
Yeah, I agree with that too. And I just thought that exactly that point that, we have seen over the course of the show. And I talked about how there's not always like a lot of, character progress here. There's like not interesting arcs for a lot of the characters that they've had here on the show. And that he basically just saw her and he was like, like basically cynical. I'm only there for myself and I'm not going to risk my own life. And I'm just here for, to poke, my thumb into the powers that be eyes, but I'm just a mercenary. And then he sees her and that's it. His life has changed and he wants to be a good person for her.
Right.
And of course they have to sell a lot of this kind of uneven character development in this particular episode. And I actually thought it worked. I thought like, it was actually, all that stuff was really beautiful. And I thought I
like to tease you a little bit, because the right after you were really, talking about it being a cynical show, they've turned like really gooey and mushy the past couple episodes, like right as soon as you said that, just to like poke in your eye, like, no, we're not. We're just, a bunch of softies over here. But
they re-edited the episode after they heard my complaints.
right.
So this relationship, and I think it's the performance, worked for me in a way that the whole Huey and Starlight thing, maybe you have more affection for them in general.
I do.
That whole shipping between the two of them never really worked for me. And they tried to break them up a whole bunch of times. They always came up with reasons to make things complicated between them. And I understand the plot needs it. So I wasn't too critical of it. In general, by the way, I'm not that critical of it. I just kind of take it and be like, that's not my favorite part of the show, but I'm not overtly critical of their relationship. But just to speak to the fact that the romantic scenes between them last week didn't really hit me emotionally, whereas this really did. I thought this just worked.
Okay, well, I thought those scenes last week were quite good as well. But yeah, at least I would say too about Kimiko, even if I kind of slightly rolled my eyes at the you saved me kind of thing, I did think that not only was one of the best Frenchie episodes, but also, at least compared to the rest of the season, where they were, really pulling out the stops with Kimiko talking like, TikTok or whatever it was supposed to be. And then this episode, they really kind of didn't do that at all that I can recall. They kind of pulled all that out, I guess, knowing that it was going to be, that they're setting up for the big finale with her and Frenchie. But yeah, I appreciated that she was a little more restrained in her kind of absurdity, pop culture absurdity that she'd been displaying the rest of the season.
I wrote that in my notes that this is the reason they made her talk this season, is because they reverse engineered it from this scene. Because they're like, if they were signing the whole time, it would not have been the same emotional impact.
Yeah. They still managed to figure out ways to have some of the signing, like when she's on the other side of the glass.
Yeah, when she's like radiated. Yeah. Too weak to talk.
Right. Yeah.
What did you think about that scene where he tries to like lure Homelander in there for a moment it's not like it barely bothers him at all, because he could just like walk out the door. Right. He could have done a more, he did give his life for that moment of a Homelander, a distraction, I guess.
Yeah,
But I think
it was
primarily he's killing himself too, right? So like Homelander can't torture him until he like gives up their location or something.
Yeah, I guess that might be part of it. Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that aspect of it. I just mainly keyed on the fact that he saw that Homelander was just about to get Kimiko and Sage, and so he just did that little thump against this, with his finger. It's kind of a neat thing that he could just tap the side of the door slightly, and all of a sudden, shoop, there's Homelander just across the room, and tenth of a second flat or whatever.
I read it more as like exactly what I described. Like if he's going to say like they escaped and I'm not going to tell you who it is. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to kill myself so that you can't torture me into telling you.
Right.
And I'm going to be in this room, right? So like I'm going to stay in this room until I'm dead. And then you can stay here with me if you'd like. But of course, Homelander's like, I'm not going to hang out in this room with you. So
I think probably the biggest reason that Homelander skedaddled is that Frenchie bluffed him about the idea that they'd already made another kind of soldier boy type that could take away his powers. And he's like sitting there like, oh crap, here I just got my V1, but then it could all be taken away by this thing that they've come up with. So
that's true, right? But if he actually believes that he will be weakened and then Kimiko can sneak up on him, that he probably wants to get out.
Right. I think that I took that Frenchie was even implying that he might have gotten somebody else besides Kimiko, like they might have multiple Supes that are all irradiated and ready to soldier boy him. So,
what did you think about that whole reveal there? Right. So at this point, I think if you had to predict, do you think we have Kimiko now has his power? Because as I predicted last week, that by the way, like literally what I predicted last week, I'm like, this guy, his dad, Soldier Boy, just wants to, I was saying he just wants to like roam the earth and like have sex with people and do drugs. And he's literally like, I'm just going to fuck my way through the Banana Republic, right? Right. It's like, that's literally what I was envisioning when I said some of those things last week. And,
I think we both were envisioning that. I think it was solid on both our parts there.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm like, but I have a feeling that he's going to end up knocked out until they need him again for the plot, or maybe until like potential spin-off in the future or something.
Right.
And so I was a little disappointed that they just kind of.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how they just sort of can put him on ice
whenever they want. Yeah, it's a little too simple. Yeah. So now, I mean, I think he still factors into this because now you'll be like, oh, I see the end game's going to be him versus Kimiko. But, if it's Soldier Boy as well, that, he's a wild card, right? Because if it's Kimiko and Soldier Boy, then there's really no way out. It's like checkmate. But if it's neither one of them can fly, though, so I guess he can fly away. But I guess some combination of this is where it comes back to like some of those weaker superheroes. If they all, work together, then, there's an opportunity to, enclose them somehow and then use the power against them. So there could be some kind of group battle next episode.
Right. And there was a point made on the Defenders podcast that maybe you're not really familiar, at least past season 1, you're not familiar with season 2 of Gen V, but these are the two big questions I asked for you. And maybe let me introduce them here quickly to get the first one out of the way. And then for the second one, the first question I had for you was, what do you think of, since you speak French, what do you think of Frenchie's accent? It's a bit dubious. I'm not sure, but maybe he's the, true Frenchman or whatever, but it doesn't sound genuine to me.
Agreed. The second one was exactly that. Like I actually have that in my notes, is the Gen V characters, which I know enough that I recognize her because she's like the star of that show. I don't recognize I don't remember if these other characters were even in season 1, but yeah. So what do we need to know if we have not watched Gen V at all, or season 1, season 2?
Well, there are a few new characters that you wouldn't have met, but I think the most important one was at least introduced as though she's just kind of like a throwaway, like not a very big deal. But I think, there's basically, I don't even remember her name or anything, but her power is that for, I think it's 90 seconds, and I think maybe she has to touch them, but basically she can copy the powers of any other Supe by touching them, and then she gets that power for like 90 seconds. So it's kind of like Rogue from the X-Men, but not as permanent as that. Or I guess Rogue wasn't originally permanent, but then she touched somebody for too long, or whatever. I don't know if you followed all those kind of ins and outs with that, but it's along those lines. But it's just a 90-second deal. So there was speculation on the other podcasts, that TV podcast industries, that maybe she was going to
touch Homelander.
Or that would be an idea too. But they were thinking more that she might just touch Soldier Boy, take that power, then use it to depower Homelander, and then.
So when she touches the other person, does the other person temporarily lose their power, or she just copies it, but they're equally powered?
So yeah, so with Rogue, it would sort of weaken them and stuff, and if she did it for too long, it would potentially kill them or something, or permanently depower them at least. But yeah, I think this is just a copy paste rather than a cut and paste.
Okay. And why and now I forget her name again. The lead from Gen V.
Oh, Marie.
So she, with her blood powers, she claims that like I'm like a real threat to Homelander, and I have not seen evidence of that in what I remember of the show. But they're like, well, only if you can control your powers, which of course was like a dig at her, because she still, I guess in season 2, still has not learned to control them. But in what way is she so powerful against Homelander? Well,
first of all, that line, I looked at Reddit a little bit, and people are definitely complaining about that line, because those who are familiar with Gen V are like, no, that was actually a major plot arc of the second season, was her learning to control her powers.
Okay.
So that, I don't know what that's necessarily about, but she potentially, I think the idea is that she could, like explode Homelander's head, just like the way that she's done to others. So, and if you remember, the Victoria Newman had the same power.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. That was actually, she was like infected with the same version of the V or something. I remember there was a connection between the two of them.
Yeah. But in the subplot in the Gen V was that the guy who took over as chancellor of the school was training her like sensei style. Okay. And she was resistant to her wanting to do it, but he basically threatened her friends or that kind of thing. And so she just went along with it. But he saw this potential for her to be like the most powerful superhero of all, and so on, and was training her to focus her powers to where she could beat anybody. And so, yeah, I think there's a bit of an implication that maybe she could pop his head, or, it's unclear. I mean, Homelander taunted Victoria Newman like, oh, you think you could actually do it to me? Or maybe you should try, And of course, if he's ready with his laser eyes.
Right. I think that's what he said to her. He goes like, just try it. I'll like slice you in half before you get started.
Right. So it'd be helpful to do it when he's,
and when he's got his back turned.
Yeah, not braced for it or whatever. But also,
and he's got all the psychics around telling him what's going on.
Right. But I think the implication too now is that Marie has weaponized the power much more than Victoria Newman ever did. So
interesting. Anybody else from Gen V that we need to think about?
No, I don't think there were two characters introduced together. They're both friends that were kind of on the D list of, really the power copying person shouldn't be thought of that way at all if she uses it well. But her friend that was also introduced in that same episode has like Medusa hair power, but it's only over her pubic hair.
That'd be a really awkward costume she'd have to wear all the time.
Right. So yeah, I don't know if that's really going to come and play. The Sage's boyfriend was the I guess Vought or whatever, Frederick Vought or whatever his name was, who invented all this stuff, but Marie totally exploded his head real good. So I don't think that really hard to see how that would factor in. So yeah, I don't know. I can't think of anybody else, but certainly the power copying girl is worth watching, waiting for.
Yeah, they'll probably tie him in there. But considering the show has been canceled and they're like, I think they wanted to integrate this cast more into this show, but that show hasn't done that well. And they canceled it now after season 2. I would assume they pretty minimized for, we can leave speculation for the end, but I think they probably minimized how they were going to use these characters by the end.
I keep seeing on the Prime Video app, I keep seeing them saying that Gen V is trending. I don't know if that's just marketing hype or something, but
it's probably trending because people are catching up on it now that these characters have popped up on the.
Oh, right. That can make sense. They're like, wait, who's that? Okay.
What was that? Now I got to watch that too.
Right.
I guess I got a lot of cramming to do before next week.
But I guess if people are casual viewers of The Boys, how would they even know? It's not like they say, "Oh, hello, Marie," from our sister show, Gen V.
People know. People, especially the Boys fandom is, pretty into this show. So I think they figured out.
Right, but see, I guess I'm trying to imagine the person who didn't watch Gen V but watches The Boys but would know. I mean, I guess there's probably also people like you that watch some of Gen V, and so then when the characters pop up, they're like, okay, well, I recognize where that show's from. Maybe I should watch the second season.
And when something's trending, by the way, it's like, the difference between like the number 1 show, which The Boys, I think was number 1 trending right now. So that the difference between that and being number 10 is like, a 10-fold audience difference, right? Like Gen V, for example, which premiered, I think when it was the first season, when it premiered was like in number 1 or number 2 the week it premiered, but I forget the numbers, but they were like not even a quarter of what what The Boys ratings
the
were.
Mothership.
Yeah. And speaking of that, by the way, I wanted to be clear about this in the last conversation we had. I was talking about how the show has been like less, or I was wondering if the show was less popular because you see how, like, for example, The Watch isn't talking about this show this season, and some of the fandom type podcasts aren't really covering it as much. And I was curious to be like, well, has the show been fading? And I also was wondering about the budget that they're spending, how they're spending on the show. And you mentioned that they were spending less, I think was the
right. Well, that's at least what the TV podcast industry's people seem pretty certain is the case. So
spending less on it.
Way less, yeah.
So I was curious about that. So I actually went and like had Gemini just run the numbers and say compare them. And it was pretty fascinating that the growth between the past 2 seasons from 3 to 4 it was already the number 1 show on Amazon, bigger than their Lord of the Rings series, which was already had like, 40 or 50 million viewers worldwide. So it's bigger than that. And then last season when they premiered, they were 21% bigger than the previous season. So already like another huge leap forward. Okay. And then the only numbers I have so far from this season based on this analysis was they were comparing the Nielsen streaming numbers, and it premiered with about 2/3 of the streams of the previous season. But last season premiered with 3 episodes and this season premiered with 2. So I'm like, I think per episode, you're talking about the same audience, which is already a record audience. So I think that's still very popular show.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that is interesting. And how does Invincible compare?
Invincible is very popular, by the way. Invincible is, I think the Invincible regularly is on those Nielsen streaming numbers. I haven't done a comparison, but the finale of, I think I haven't done the full analysis, but you could probably pull it up. I think that it's probably around 80% of the audience if we compare the previous season of The Boys to this concluded season of Invincible. I think it's about 80% of that audience, but that's a massive audience.
Yeah. So I wonder why they cut The Boys' budget so much. That seems weird.
I don't understand myself. I think maybe they were anticipating a bigger drop. I don't know.
They're just trying to milk it for what else they can make off of it. They're like, oh, these people will show up anyway. I don't know. Could be some
the final episode, by the way, Alan, is going to premiere in movie theaters on one day earlier.
Nice.
But who knows? It could be a 1.5 hour episode, and it could be all a giant battle royale between all of the superpowered people. It could be they spent the whole $100 million on the last episode of the show. Right?
I'm sure it's safe to bet that it's going to be more of a spectacle than the rest of the season has been, but we'll see.
Agreed. Okay, a couple of things that are interesting here. Sage was complaining about the fact that she somehow wasn't able to calculate these things. At least they acknowledge it here on the show. She's like, I didn't understand the power of love. I didn't understand it.
Right. Even though she likes that Love Island show.
She loves Love Island, but she couldn't understand.
I mean, as you recall, like me being the apologists. I was really defending her before that I just don't believe even the smartest person in the world means that you can just plot out everything that's going to happen in a super complex system like the entire society of planet Earth.
And then people are too unpredictable. They're too emotional.
Right. Yeah.
She could do the math, though, to get the radiation correctly, to spread it out appropriately.
Yes, that was child's play for her. And
that
Frenchie,
was easy. That's no problem.
Yeah.
Not even 5 minutes, 30 seconds.
Right.
She triple checked it in like a few minutes.
But she normally never does. And Frenchie's math was only slightly stupid compared to most people. So that's a big compliment to him that he's actually, fairly smart.
What else do we have there? Maybe we'll circle back if you have any specific things you want to shout out. I have a bunch of funny things that I actually did enjoy. One was I liked Sam Jackson doing the voice of the shark.
I didn't realize that until I went to Reddit. I mean, I knew it was that type of character, but yeah, that's kind of funny.
So I did like that. I also liked the whole reveal that the Deep is like, hey, rescue my dad, my pop-up. He's just like slinking away like, no.
I know. And then they've got the social media video. I guess if he were more like Homelander level ruthless, he would have gone and killed all those people so they couldn't show the video to anybody. But I guess it was live streaming too and whatever.
Yeah,
but
you never know.
It did seem like I was, far be it from me to like actually defend the Deep, but I did feel there was a certain amount of like that's fair or whatever to him saying like, could you throw him a life for this? It didn't seem like he was like that far away and there was nobody attempting to do anything.
No one else was trying to rescue him. Yeah, it's true. Right. It's true. Why don't you go swim after Pop?
Right.
It is still very funny, just the visual of it. Although I do have a big question as to whether, we are like just within, I don't know how long next week's episode is. These have all been pretty long episodes. So maybe it's an hour and a half long.
Right.
But we are within like an hour and a half wrapping all of this up. And I'm not sure this is where I'm going to be spending my time, but I guess it is pretty funny scene, but pretty inessential here. I mean, what does it tell us that the Deep can't go into the water?
Right.
And if we assume that everyone's going to die, if like Homelander shoves him into the water next, like get in there, you have to help me out.
Right.
And he gets like eaten by sharks or something, that would be funny.
Yeah. And it was funny too that he was talking to his agent about going to San Antonio or whatever. It's like, dude, you have to go somewhere where there's water. That's your whole brand,
He must be nowhere near the water.
Yeah, he's trying to argue that like he could branch out beyond that, but yeah, I'm not quite sure how. I mean, he's got super strength or whatever, but yeah, that's without all the creatures of the Deep obeying his command. I don't know.
All right, another important point here we have to talk about is I have a lot of issues with how this all played out, but overall interesting. The whole situation where, you are literally recruiting only the most loyal of the Homelander's fans,
right,
and trying to sell him that he is now God, not the son of God.
Right.
By the way, this advertisement or video or whatever you want to call it, very funny. The whole like, Jesus comes down from heaven to pass on the crown to him.
Right. Well, and it was great too seeing the like all the things like VFX be added or whatever kind of stuff.
Jesus strings.
Yeah, well, yeah, he's in fairness, if you look at some sections of the Old Testament, they were also pretty extreme about that stuff. Like if you don't fully, buy into our particular religion and commit genocide against anybody any groups that are, that preach differently and stone anyone down by the city gate who talks about other gods than Yahweh or whatever. There's a lot of that stuff in there. So he's
Yahweh or the highway.
That's right, the highway. There we go. Yeah, it's a good slogan for you. But yeah, so they. I mean, it was definitely harsh though to just say, all right, well, anyone that's not the 100% true believer, we're just gonna. I don't know whether there was a plan for explaining anything to their families or what that was going to be about. And of course, they're feeling like the lady that said thank you to Starlight's feeling sheepish, I'm sure, about her previous denunciation of the same Supe. But of course, she was brainwashed by Vought news and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I wonder if that'll play into the finale at all, where these people start talking to their friends and neighbors, or if they're just going to be too scared to do so, and how that's going to play
I can't
out.
imagine that having much of an impact on the plot. I think it's just just kind of showing them to that safe house where they reunite with those other characters from Gen V. I assume. I mean, if anything, I would predict, here's my cynicism coming in, that one of those people is going to totally be like, well, maybe if we rat all these people out to Homelander,
Right.
that, we'll be back in his good graces again, which I think is more likely the case than everybody reversing on it. And also,
I think
that they would be like, in my mind, I was imagining that, what's going to happen. They'll kill them all and just be like, Starlight came along and murdered them all.
Right. Right. Well, that would have been a good excuse. Yeah. But I mean, I think the kind of like more craven kind of reaction you're talking about, they definitely played into that with the Hollywood guys, and with shoot, I'm wanting to say Bill Hader, but it was not Hader, it was his rival.
Yeah, he makes a joke that he's going to get more parts.
Right. But he was turning everybody in and trying to get curry favor with Homelander and stuff. I don't think those like regular people, including one from Duluth, where I graduated high school. I assume they meant Duluth, Minnesota, but it's not Duluth, Georgia. But I don't know. I think those people were a little too ingenuous to quite take it that far. But we'll see.
Will Forte.
Will Forte. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, like the whole conversation again, tying into the fact of like, sacrifice is worth it. And when Mother's Milk is talking about how he got beat up for, and then like how he wore that name as a point of pride, which, I still don't buy that that's how he got the name, but, I'll buy that. I thought the scene worked pretty well in general.
Did you notice a subtle thing that they threw in there to show his change of heart? Did you catch this at all?
Probably not.
Okay, because you remember like a sort of a character trait that he had in the early seasons was being a big germaphobe, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then earlier this season, they showed him just like picking a candy bar up off the floor that, as somebody else said to him, like, oh, that's got pubic hair on it. You're just eating it. And he's like, yeah, that's because I've already given up. I've already, like,
oh, right. Mm-hmm.
Right. And all that kind of stuff. But in this episode, he went back to like using the like decontamination wipes on his hand and stuff like that.
After he threw the rat. That's
right. Yeah.
So he does have hope yet again.
Yes, he does. Yeah. Ooey gooey hope is spreading around everywhere.
That's right. Hope is like love, and hope is going to maybe Homelander just needs a hug.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of what it seemed like for a while there with all of his breastfeeding and stuff. But
that's right. That's a hole that can never be filled.
Right.
I got a couple. I'm going to start nitpicking and just a little things that I think are. I don't understand why this show plays so fast and loose with like these kind of basic things that bother me.
Okay.
But like just seeing Starlight walking around with Mother's Milk, the compound. It's like, what? Because she's wearing a hat, and I'll buy that because they actually want to lure her in. So, but I mean, the fact that no one's like alerted that she's there, it's a little questionable. But way worse. I bring that up just as like the aperitif there too. The way worse is the fact that you have Butcher like in his full trench coat, just wandering around the set. I'm like, what the hell is going on? You're not even trying to. What are you doing?
Did you catch though? They did lampshade that at least.
In what way?
Because Annie said right to him basically the same thing you're saying. Like, you're not even going to try to blend in, dude. Come on.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, that doesn't make it any better.
I guess I'm generous with when they do the lampshading. I'm like, all right, at least they're, that's
they're aware of it at least. Yeah,
I'll cut them some slack, and it usually works on me. I'm like, all right, at least you're acknowledging it, you're aware of it, you're not just thinking we're all a bunch of dupes or whatever, So
you had an opportunity to put him into a really goofy, awkward outfit at least, right? And how funny that would be to see him, and he would be unrecognizable just because he's not wearing his usual outfit.
I've been wondering, by the way, something. Did they do some like filming tricks or whatever on Star Trek to make him just seem smaller? Because he seems so big and imposing on the boys. Are they making him look bigger than he is on?
They're probably making him bigger here, is what I assume. Okay. And I also don't know, like so many actors are so short in general.
Right.
It seems to be a kind of a pattern. So it could just be that he's like average height and they put him in like boots that give him another inch or two.
Okay.
And everybody else is just 5'6" or 5'7". So he's like hours over them, It's like Judge Dredd. Do you ever see him in Judge Dredd? It's the same thing.
No,
Very
I
imposing.
didn't. But he's kind of looms even compared to, he seems like he's bigger than like Soldier Boy and Homelander and stuff. He just seems like a really big dude, and like he was Bones on Star Trek, and he just kind of seemed like just a regular dude just hanging out with the others.
He's 6'1", by the way. So,
okay,
so that's pretty tall for an actor,
yeah.
by the way. Pretty
yeah.
tall. You crack 6 feet as an actor. That's pretty rare.
All right. So yeah, they clearly were doing some stuff on Star Trek to not make him sort of loom over everybody. Clearly,
yeah, he probably looked pretty too imposing if he's like bigger than Captain Kirk. Although he's definitely taller than Kirk.
Yeah, but you can't be showing up Kirk. That's not allowed. I don't know if you're a big Star Trek guy, but I am. Although I'm not just
I used to be when I was much younger. I'm like so out of it. I didn't even like the J.J. Abrams Star Trek films that much. I thought the first one was okay. And I didn't really like the Into Darkness at all.
Okay. Into Darkness, I thought was definitely weaker, but I really liked the first one.
I thought the third one, which was kind of low stakes, I thought that was a lot of fun. But I mean,
yeah, that's
as far as it goes. I just thought it was very fun.
Yeah, I think Into Darkness is the weakest one. That's the way I remember.
Agreed. That's the perfect example, by the way. We're talking about off mic about the great inflation. I think when that came out, it had like better cinema scores than the first Star Trek movie.
Oh, wow.
And everybody's just like, this movie's going to be big. It's going to be bigger than the last Star Trek movie. And then everybody went to see it, and everybody was kind of like, that wasn't that good. That cinema score was lying.
Yeah.
They said that those screenings were just for fans.
And they had Benedict Cumberbatch, spoilers for Star Trek Into Darkness, but they had him going around insisting that his character wasn't Khan when he, of course, was Khan.
That was the funniest thing about it, was that everybody knew it, so that when you watch the movie and they're like, Khan, it's just like, oh, that's something we've been hearing about for 6 months.
Right. Yeah. Nothing like something that's treated as this big, amazing twist that everyone's like, yeah, okay, yeah, we got that.
Yeah, already. I knew that already. When I saw the poster, I knew it.
Yeah.
And my other nitpick here, by the way, is to do with him and Huey. First of all, I like some of the interactions between them. I like how the show just reminds us of things. And again, I'm probably not big enough fan of the show to get every little Easter egg, but I do like that he wakes up singing that or hearing that Billy Joel song. And I'm like, oh, that's right. He's this big Billy Joel fan. I forgot about what a big part of the story that was. That was a big character trait of his early on in the show. And then when he's trying to distract himself from having his mind read, and Butcher tells him to like name his 10 favorite Billy Joel songs as a way.
Right. Yeah. I thought that was fun. But wait, you said you had a nitpick about it though.
Oh, the nitpick for me is, okay, so they get knocked out. He gets handcuffed. And then, eventually they get the upper hand on this psychic guy by killing him with his, cancer tentacles. But he was handcuffed. Like, cancer tentacles aren't handcuffed. Like, what happened? Like, what's going on there?
Well, as far as why he didn't use them before?
Because he was mind controlled, right? Right.
That's what he said. The synapse was deactivating his powers. And so Huey distracted him, so he's no longer...
So that he can use his powers.
Him. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So even when he was out of the room, wasn't controlling his mind enough to be able to read that they were planning this while he was out the door. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, that's fair, I guess. Yeah, I was initially thinking like, oh, Victor's barking up the wrong tree here, but that is a fair point.
It's just it's just the inconsistency of it, right? He's like, he can like read hundreds of minds and know everything that they're doing, and then he's like out of the room, or he like literally can read their minds from across the room while he's literally at the same time trying to control or read someone else's mind. That's his current job, and he somehow knows they're there, is able to knock them out. And he leaves the room, and he can control him, but he's not controlling Huey's thoughts. And he obviously is reading Huey's mind. And that's when he's seeing these images of his murdered brother. And that's so distracting that it like releases. Anyway, it's just, this is very inconsistent.
Yeah, I think it's fair. And as resident apologist, fan wanker, I will say that I think maybe I had thought before that the two of them cooked up this plan off camera that we weren't shown, but now I'm thinking that is probably too much of a flaw with that, so that maybe Huey just freelanced that and it was a little jazz improv, and then Butcher realized like, oh, these tentacles in my mind are fading out. I see what Huey's up to. And at that point, the synapse was too distracted to catch his intentions or whatever. So there's my favorite.
I like that theory, by the way, and now I am going to read it that way, and I do like that. And I did think about it in the moment. The only thing that maybe changed my mind was when he said maybe we were distracting you, because he did use that "we" like it was a play.
Right.
But in the moment, I thought Huey had come up with this but I like your version of it better because it does explain this whole thing, and it also makes Huey like more savvy, which he occasionally gets to be. So I do like that. So I'm going to go with that interpretation. I like that.
Yeah,
and it does close that loophole, that plot.
Right. All right. Good deal.
I'm on board with that. I like it. And it makes me like Huey more. So I like it for that.
Yeah. Well,
Huey needs more to do. So that's
he's always been clever, or some would say extremely lucky, but he manages to wiggle his way out of a lot of jams.
True. I kind of like that in the early going on the show. I discussed this already. I kind of like the fact when like early on, they didn't know what the hell they were doing and they were like accidentally successful at what they were doing. That was the more entertaining version of the show, because it's like, how do they keep winning? They're so inept. And then it's like a lot of it's just the pomposity, which I like that aspect too, right? Like where you just like, we have all these tools, we have all these weapons, we have all this surveillance. We can't lose to those idiots. And then of course they keep losing. So that kind of pomposity, that kind of hubris is fun to see kind of get poked. It just got to a point when they were trying so hard to like not get these people killed, when I'm like, these people should have been killed 400 times by now. Because like they're in the room with Homelander, and then Homelander's like, I love that, by the way, which happens all the time in the show, where like Homelander's about to like kill everybody. They're all there. And then he turns around and gets distracted, and he turns around and then he's just like, they've just walked out, and he's just like, oh, where did they go? I'm like, what are you talking about? In the hallway, probably.
I don't know. I don't know
how quickly you can catch those guys.
You're going to have to give me some timestamps. This sounds like false allegations.
I'm oversimplifying it, but
okay.
Like, I mean, I'll give you a specific one where I do that exact thing happen, was where I already brought this up. It's one of my least favorite scenes of the whole thing. So I remember it so clearly. Part of it was because I don't like that cruelty of, I've been critical of the fact that the show's POV is that you're either a boy or you're a superhero, and like everybody else is just kind of chattel that's kind of gets thrown in there for fun, like it literally as a body you throw in front of somebody else to distract Homelander for a second, right? And the show basically has that attitude too. And as a matter of fact, it's not even like tragic that the person dies, it's like always a joke that they died. And the example I give all the time is when you have Huey is in the air ducts. I think this was last season, when they're at the ice skating rink and they're about to do the Jesus ice skating thing. And then Homelander, loses his cool and starts to can smell Huey because a droplet of his sweat drops down and he smells it. And then he's like trying to laser him. And while he's lasering him, he ends up like lasering off one of the ice dancer's hands, and everybody's bleeding all over the ice. And then Huey,
I'm a horrible person, but I was laughing my ass off through all.
Well, no, it is funny. Amazing. I actually agree. No, that's actually funny. The thing that bothered me in that scene the most is that then Huey escapes and he gets on the roof deck. And then, Homelander comes running out the door behind him, and he looks around, doesn't see him, and he could identify him with a drop of sweat before. And he's just like, Urgh! I'm like, like, how far could this kid go? Like, what are you talking about? Like, at least make an effort to catch him,
Yeah, I don't remember how that all ended, so I'll have to take your word for it. But
maybe Starlighter was up there and flew away with him. But once again, it's like, it's still as, he could have easily caught them. So anyway, it's just too much, too much of that.
He's certainly, just like let people go before, but that's sort of arrogance. And I thought, we already talked about it on our last recording, but I thought it was kind of a cool example that I totally bought, was the Legend getting let go. Just, because he was thought he was dead, so he just thought he has no reason to worry about going, and kind of clapping Homelander on the shoulder, which you could see Homelander gave a look like similar to the Queen of England would, or something, like someone touching me, that's not normal or whatever. But that because he was felt free to just be candid because he was dead for sure. Ended up that he wasn't dead. And I bought it. I thought that Homelander would actually be like, okay, I'm gonna take mercy on this guy because he's kind of just giving me some straight talk. You know, I don't know.
Yeah,
it worked
those
for me.
I mean, I don't mind when Homelander's aggressively trying to murder him a minute before, and then he just stops. Those are the ones that irritate me. When he's like, when he just like connects with somebody on a human level, and he's like, or like for example, where he didn't kill Butcher multiple times because he's like, I am trying to maintain the illusion of this family unit. When that was the case, that made sense. It's just that at some point the show couldn't come up with any more excuses, and it became usually most of my nitpicks, like those really aggressive ones, are in the previous season where some of this stuff really started to feel very rote. Like it is something that kind of bothers me with shows in general, where certain patterns develop in the storytelling, and then you just see the pattern again, and they don't even explain it anymore because they're just like, because that's what happens on the show. I'm like, that's not a good reason. Like Star Trek, by the way, is notorious for this. So I'll just
and Star Wars, we get
absolutely
Death Star, then we get another Death Star, then we get Star Killer Base. You know, it's kind of like and then somehow Palpatine is returned. You know,
spoilers. No, anyway. So a couple of funny things that I forgot to bring up, but that I want to circle back to because they were maybe the comedic highlights of the episode. One was I like when they show up on the set of the Vought productions where this whole thing is happening and they're having this test screening, and Starlight shows up and they're shooting the scene between, is that supposed to be A-Train? I don't know who they're supposed to be in that.
Oh, that's right. And they have someone dressed up as Starlight. Yeah.
Yeah. And she's like smuggling migrants in to have pregnant migrants to have babies in America.
Oh, right. Yeah. They're like, oh, there we go. Birthright citizenship. Suck on that.
Right. And it's like, you don't understand. This could be full of malls over here. And he's like, I don't want malls. I want freedom.
Yeah. That was kind of interesting that they're playing with the kind of MAGA anti-corporate kind of thing, which seems like it'd be dangerous territory for Vought to get into because they're all about pro-corporate stuff. So.
Well, then think about how many people doing that right now in actual politics, right? Where it's like they've aligned themselves with people who are, like I just find it so funny that like, think about right now at this moment, we just have, what's his name from Health Services just had to step down because he's been having a fight with the Trump administration about loosening or accelerating approval of all of these flavored vapes. Like, that's make America healthy again. You're going to lose your job because we're not getting enough vapes on the streets.
Wait, RFK Jr. stepped down, or this is somebody else?
No, the guy who's, what's his name?
I'll actually confess that I like some of RFK's nutrition stuff. He came out with his version of the nutrition pyramid.
More protein. No, I actually agree that's actually, I don't think that the food pyramid is actually that. But although, like the amount of protein is probably a little much. But in general, more protein is actually good in diets.
Yeah, especially as a ratio to your carbs and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, the Health and Human Services spokesman.
Okay. So he was touting vapes. That's interesting.
No. He was blocking the approval for more vapes.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So it's like all this like nicotine, different types of nicotine products like chewing gums and these packets and stuff. And apparently the Trump administration was frustrated that they were blocking the FDA's allowing the FDA's block on all these untested nicotine products to go forward. Okay. And I'm like, that's the Maha. There you go.
What's the one that Chris Ryan likes? It's some sort of
Zins.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
He loves those.
I don't know if it's like a lozenge or what exactly that is, but it seems like it's something like that.
It's like in a pack. I've never used it. I used to smoke many, many years ago, but it's like it's like kind of like chewing tobacco, but I can't imagine that's good for your gums either, by the way. So I guess it's better than smoking. I'm glad he's trying to quit smoking.
Right.
Anyway, so back to that whole Western and all that stuff. Funny that, obviously this caricature of, or how they're making Starlight represented there. But the part that made me laugh out loud was when their actor's complaining about the dialogue. He's going like, you cut a line. And he's like, well, this line is preposterous. And he says that that script has been written by the Taylor Sheridan AI.
Which I imagine Taylor Sheridan might be offended by. I'm sure he thinks that
I think Taylor Sheridan, who writes every one of those scripts, is using AI to write those scripts. Like, there's no way he's writing all those scripts.
Oh,
by the way, Taylor Sheridan, I don't know if you know this, but a very good screenwriter, right? Like, like Hell or High Water, Sicario, right? Like, excellent screenwriter. But now he's like churning out like 40 hours of TV per week. I'm like, I can't be good anymore. I'm sorry. I don't believe it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and he's sort of fought back against the WGA? What's the name of the union for the writer? I think
Writers Guild, yeah, I think
WGA. Yeah, that they were fighting to keep writers' rooms a certain size, and he's over there like, no, I don't want anyone in my writers' room, just me.
Right.
Which I never thought of that possibility that he could be using AI to do it. I mean, I guess we're
he's definitely using it now. Maybe not a couple of years ago when he started this whole project, but he's definitely using it now.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Well,
I mean, that I don't know that for sure, but I speculate that.
Strongly suspect. Yeah. Interesting. But I still think that he would object that the dialogue they were spouting was not up to par with whatever version of him, the AI version or whatever else you want to say.
Right. And I mean, of course, people love, he's amazingly successful. So, I mean.
Yeah. So he owns some incredibly huge ranch in Montana. And I guess they do a lot of their filming up there, but it's sort of I guess like a Skywalker ranch type situation he's got going.
And and like I said, I mean, like I was a fan. He was early in his career. If he wrote a script, that was a movie I was curious about watching. And I've seen most of those early scripts. Was the other one,
right.
the River, what's her name? Scarlet Witch and Hawkeye. Frozen River.
Okay,
murder mystery. Yeah. So I mean, he wrote some really good scripts back in the day, and I just I tried to watch Yellowstone, and just it's a soap opera basically. It's not really my thing.
Right. I watched an episode of, what was the one where
23 or 1887?
No, I did. My ex-wife was into those, but no, the ones I watched weren't linked to the Yellowstone franchise. I watched an episode or two of the one that's about kind of a badass, lioness, right? Yeah. And I thought that wasn't too bad. I didn't really stick with it. Then Landman, Andy and Chris on the watch got me kind of intrigued about it. And I watched my son and I watched the first episode, and we were like, damn, this is actually good. I've been stereotyped into an idea of what he's all about, and this is actually quite good. And then we watched the second episode. I was like, oh my God, this is just horrendous trash. It's below where, even the critics of his style would say. So it was a quick roller coaster ride on that one. And then we didn't watch any further after that. But the second episode was just oof, terrible.
Yeah, I mean, in general, I've heard he's had good pilots on those shows, but that's just the criticism you hear over and over again. Like people who love Yellowstone. And I was just by the middle of season 1 of Yellowstone, I was like, it's just this is just so ridiculously melodramatic. I'm really not engaging with it. But, I was still kind of, maybe I'll keep sampling it, but I kept falling further and further behind. And then people who loved the show were in season 3, even though they kept watching it, were like, man, this show's really off. I'm like, wow, season 1's the high point. I don't know if I'm going to commit to this thing, So.
Yeah. Oh, he's so prolific. You could just watch a lot of season 1s. And
you could, for sure. Yeah. Okay, and the other funny thing I wanted to bring up was Butcher's pep talk, where he's like, Posh Spice wasn't even in their biggest hit song, but now look at her. Even though she has, she has the inability to smile, she has still become the most successful of the
Right. Yeah, she's still with that big soccer star or footy or whatever. I'm sure Darren would be, apoplectic at me calling it soccer or whatever, but I'm not really a fan of that sport. So
Beck's, what do you call it? Beckham.
That's right. Bend it there we go.
So she's
all together, and
that Beckham documentary is pretty good, by the way, on Netflix if you ever chance.
Okay.
Even as a layperson, it's interesting. See how so young and became so famous so quick.
Yeah. But yeah, that was pretty good. And that was the example too of what I was talking about with the show seemingly, unless they're going to really jerk the rug out from under us, which would be shocking, but I would sort of give them some points for audacity if they do, but that they're really seemingly tipping their hand toward being more in the hopecore kind of mode at this point, rather than the cynical, dark mode.
Anything else you wanted to bring up? Oh, you want to spend a few more minutes on what happens in the screening room, actually, where, they go in there and actually rescue these people. I think we touched on that enough to talk about my cynical read is maybe one of those idiots. Well, still reveal the location. Once again, take these people's phones away. You got to take these people's phones away.
Right. Well, they definitely, like, Starlight was really foolish to let her I guess her half brother that she just learned about, to let him just cruise up to his room after he had just called her a terrorist and everything. So was definitely a pretty silly oversight on her part. These people, though, I mean, that kid, I think, that saw things differently by the end of, his run on that. I think it was just that one episode, I guess, but I think he saw things differently by the end of all that. And I've got to think that, contrasted to the Hollywood guys, I've got to think all those people are like, wow, okay, Homelander ordered us to be killed, and Starlight and her friends saved us. I just would have a real hard time picturing them not being converts at that point. And as also, these were the people who were not the true believers to begin with. So
any speculation for next week? What do you think? Do you have any predictions? Oh, by the way, before you go into that,
exactly.
If this holds up, I think this is actually accurate because it's the listing in the movie theaters. Mm-hmm. The finale is 65 minutes, which seems pretty short, by the way.
Yeah, that's about the same as they all have been. Yeah, interesting. But yeah, well, I'm not nearly as good at predicting as you are. I would say that I like the idea that the Gen V power copier person could come into play, but then I don't know, if they want to have it be solved by a character that they haven't introduced on the main show until the finale. That might be just, unsatisfying for a lot of people. Certainly,
they bring her here. Both of those characters will probably play into the end game, but I think it's going to be some kind of collaborative effort.
Well, I didn't see her in the thing, because the only characters I remember seeing from Gen V on this episode were the kind of trans character. I'm blanking on her name, but she's basically just super strong and can fire energy blasts or whatever. And then Marie, who's got the blood powers. But the character I'm talking about, I don't think was shown on this episode or on this show yet, unless I'm missing something. So they would have to just bring her into the finale with her having been set up in Gen V, but not having been set up in this show. And I'm not sure that they would, that's
it can't be the knockout blow. It's going to be just a step one or something of it.
Right.
And maybe not even the Homelander's power, but maybe someone else's power to assist, like flying or something.
Right. I mean, the speculation is that it would be Soldier Boy's power and whatever, but yeah, that would have to make her be really central to the conclusion, the way everything plays out. And then why would they go through all this trouble to have Kimiko acquire that power if they're just going to have somebody else use it for 90 seconds or whatever? So I think
you can't have Frenchie, even if things go terrible at the end. It has to be hinging primarily on her having that power, even if she dies by using it or something.
Right.
Because you literally have Frenchie die in this episode for her to have that. Exactly. And it's for what purpose, right? It doesn't.
Right. Yeah. We're going definitely very meta rather than in universe or whatever, but that is certainly the way things tend to play out, that they're not going to have him die in vain or whatever to save her, and then not have her play the Arya role, I guess you could say, or something. That seems pretty likely.
You know what I think is going to happen is, first of all, I didn't even think about this until this moment when I was thinking about who's missing here. Is Ryan, of course, right? Ryan cannot not play into the finale. It's impossible.
Yeah. I mean, if they just wanted him off the board, they could have had him be killed, as I initially thought in that scene from a few episodes ago when Homelander was pummeling him. I thought he had killed him, but then it was shown that he hadn't, but he hasn't really popped up since then. So yeah, you would think he's got to, play into this somehow.
My theory is that Ryan fights Homelander. They both have their laser eyes, and he's getting better at controlling it or whatever. So there's some kind of battle there, and he can't overpower Homelander. But with all these other folks in collaboration, they'll be able to really injure him. And this is my prediction, that Soldier Boy is going to show up and still back Homelander. And then because Homelander is going to be on his back foot, that he's going to potentially try to kill Ryan. And Homelander kills Soldier Boy to save Ryan. and in so doing,
Just do that.
redeems himself in some way before he dies as well. That's my optimistic version of it. My pessimistic version of it, and this is a coin toss, by the way, is that like there's a huge battle royale. So Homelander wins, but like, what does he win at the end? Like the whole world is like on fire or whatever, and everybody hates him, but he's the supreme being, and that's it.
Yeah, you've been pushing that. I'm absolutely going on record that I will be utterly shocked if that's what happens. But you'll get to crow until the end of time if that plays out, because I'm betting strongly against your play on this one. So we'll see.
By the way, it's a coin toss for me. Like, I do agree that the show is giving us hope. And, there's a version of it where they're like, we are finally going to give them a win, right? And there's a version of it going like, nope. Just like every other time there was hope, we're going to crush it down again.
Yeah, I can't see it. But I mean, there's like some part of me, as much as that really doesn't seem at all, not only not likely, just it seems impossible to me, that there's a little teeny part of me that's like rooting for it just because you're my pal, and then hey, that would be amazing if you predicted something so wild that seems impossible, and then you actually had it. So
I think if they have to conform, and this is something that's against my theory, by the way, as cynical as I think that the people might want to be, maybe this was written at some point. There was a written episode that way. But where I think that might not be the case is, this is obviously very valuable property to Amazon. They're going to continue this with a prequel series. And theoretically, who knows how many people survive in the end here? Maybe a sequel series at some point in the future, right? So this is obviously very popular. So having a purely apocalyptic ending, of course, does not have any kind of sequel series, but of course we're having a prequel series, so maybe that's all intentional. You can only go back in time, right? So that's a possibility. However, you could imagine that if people like really were divisive, this is like the end of House of the Dragon, I should say end of Game of Thrones, and everybody's just like, I hated that, and you ruined this character that I loved, and all these people died for nothing, and all the anger that was there, that it's going to taint other projects associated to it. So Amazon's gonna be like, I don't know, we're giving you a lot of money, and you do want to keep making these shows. I don't know if this is the way to go.
I just think, here's my argument. Like, because you made a similar argument last week, or maybe the first time we talked. I think this is the third time we talked about The Boys, right? Is that right?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. So one of the two other times you made that argument that you think that the creators really want to be as cynical and dark as you're saying, but that they'll have this pressure, network notes, corporate pressure from Amazon not to do that. But I would argue that if that were the way it was, that they would not inject so much of what I was calling the Hope Core stuff into this episode. I just think that they would say, all right, well, we won't cross the red lines that Amazon's warned us not to do, but we're at least not going to make it at all sappy. And they did make it kind of sappy. So I think that's showing their hand. That is actually how they feel.
Another thing that undercuts this is, I just found out this week that they are doing this theatrical screening. And I can't imagine them doing like, we're going to book all these 4D theaters and stuff like that for have this like experience and get all the fans out and be like, watch all your favorite characters die in bloody and horrible ways, and then go home and tell all your friends about it, because it's we're premiere tomorrow. Let's see what those ratings look like.
Right.
So I'm probably wrong about my.
Yeah, I think when we first talked about it, I thought you were probably wrong, and then after this episode, I feel like you're definitely wrong. But that's why I say it'll be an amazing turnaround, amazing win for you if it still turns out to be that way.
One more character I forgot to bring up completely and want to bring it up is Ashley. So Ashley and her, one of my favorites, as I've said before. Yeah. So what'd you think about this scene where she's like basically silenced her other half?
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, we we were watching a pretty crazy show when it depicts the president of the United States having his skull crushed in the Oval Office, and we didn't even mention it.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. That was the least, by the way, the most like the most expected moment in the episode.
Yeah. I mean, because he's kind of a nothing as a character. So, but I did think it was, it was super funny and very Ashley that she's sitting there talking to herself about how going back to like trying to win the student council elections in 8th grade or whatever, like now she's just trying to relish that she's president, which of course at that point is a pretty meaningless title, since Homelander likes to just hang out there at, the Roosevelt desk or whatever it is, or the Resolute desk or whatever, and put his feet up. But she's still technically president of the United States, and she wants to relish that. But then her sort of Jiminy Cricket conscience on the back of her head is telling her otherwise. So I thought it was kind of neat that the president had no idea that was her deal, and he was like, "Oh Jesus, what the fuck is that?" So,
and then dies a minute later.
Yeah, I wonder if she really had to sell him out. Like, it seems like she could have given a lesser version of his true thoughts, but yeah,
she gets to be president for whatever short period of time that is.
Right.
It'd be funny if Ashley becomes the president and everybody's like, "This is your real president." Like, they kill the Ashley character and Ashley survives, and everybody's just like, "Yeah, I like what she says." Oh, look.
Yeah. Well, and another thing too. I mean, this is probably going too far in the weeds of like, taking the premise seriously, but like we're getting to a point, and you can really tell that it's the end of the series, because they couldn't have gotten to this point, or it would have been a very different show, as we've kind of discussed before, if they'd gotten anywhere near this point, like earlier in the series. But like, to where it's like, what does it even really mean for Ashley or the other guy or anybody to be president when Homelander is just sitting there being like, ban nut milk, oh, we'll take it to Congress. No, just ban Congress. At that point, it's sort of like, well, so why do we have president at all? Why not just have it be Homelander's not only God, but sort of the leader of the government too? I guess he just doesn't want to hassle with some of the bureaucracy.
Well, I mean, of course, that's exactly what it is. So
yeah. But yeah, when you're no longer taking into account at all the process of separation of powers, Congress and all those kind of things, then getting the title of president seems increasingly irrelevant for Ashley. But she got her moment to bask in it, I guess.
Yeah, she doesn't get to say, "Hey, I got the power." I mean, she said she lost every election. Well, she didn't win an election either. She just got everybody ahead of her killed. So that's not
right. That's true. Yeah, she got kind of the forward presidency, I guess. But so even he had been elected, to his district and then to minority leader. But yeah, I mean, I was been wondering too, and this might be too late in the game for this to be an issue, but I was wondering too if like Homelander, while he clearly finds it useful to have these psychics do stuff for him, if he would also potentially feel threatened by them and be like, "All right, well, I've used you, and now I'm going to kill all the psychics because I don't like."
Well, inevitably, yeah. He like, if any of them can read his mind, or if he just suspects they can. He's not.
I mean, the people having a power that he doesn't have. Like, I think he'd probably feel the most secure with characters that just have kind of more generic, like super speed, and maybe they can fire some energy blasts or different things, but it's just not as powerful as him. But when they have special powers that he doesn't have at all, then he wants to rely on them, but also he's got to feel threatened by them for sure.
Oh, I mean, yeah, it goes back to what we discussed last week. It's just the fact that you can imagine that now that he is immune to the virus, he'd be more than happy to exterminate all of the other superheroes, because even if they're 1/10 as powerful as he is, then collectively they still have a threat. There's a threat to him. If they eliminate all other super beings, then it's him and then common folk. And it's just like, then he really is a god, right? He's so much more powerful than they are, that he's like, they don't serve any, they don't have any threat to him at all.
Yeah. Yeah. I tend to think that he's portrayed as so powerful that you could take all the superheroes, even hundreds of them or whatever, that have sort of similar powers as far as like super strength and vulnerability and energy blasts and things like that, and they could all train their efforts directly on him, and he could just swing around with his laser eyes and cut them down like almost instantly.
But like if him and Ryan are locked in laser eyes like they've been in the past, and then Soldier Boy goes and uses his power on him, and even just temporarily reduces him to by 50% or 60%, even if he can't fully be, then you can imagine just a bunch of people could, a bunch of superpowered people can, tear him apart, basically.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I think that he at least should rightfully be the most paranoid of, is people that have kind of the more unusual powers. Even the guy that just breathed into his face and knocked him right down.
If you can knock him out, floor, exactly. Imagine you knock him out and then you put him into a room full of radiation, and like, even if it just means that you lose your powers and you're like sitting there like, desiccated for a decade until the radiation, wears off. That's still like, incredibly unpowerful and unpleasant, I should say. And in the meantime, people could come up with like a virus that kills you or something while you're disabled.
Right. And I feel like too, like if when they first showed how affected he was by that room, I felt like they could put him in that room and then drop not even necessarily an H-bomb on him, but just like, like one of those, like, what are they called? Like Moab or whatever, mother of all bombs kind of on him or something like that. Cause he's his skin's breaking out, like, stuff. It looks like he's not as invulnerable at that point. It feels like you could kind of, knock him down and then knock him out for sure if you could use that.
Exactly. So there's always a threat, as long as, and humans could, have the same kind of threat, even using some of the things you just described. But just getting the drop on him is impossible, right? But you can definitely do that if you're a superpowered being. So.
Yeah. I mean, that was kind of the whole idea for a long time, that the CIA was, and I do wonder, like, if they haven't sort of gone in detail about this as much as you'd expect, but presumably, at least officially, everybody involved with the CIA projects to keep him in check has been, fired or killed or whatever the case is, or has gone to ground. But that's the part where I think that there's got to be some of them, or I would suspect, or wouldn't be surprised if there's some of them that are acting just as independent agents now, without kind of Mr. and Mrs. Smith style or something like that, like without having the official CIA backing. But I don't know if they really presented us with much about that. I mean, we saw that Ryan accidentally killed what was the woman? She was kind of like a motherly figure to him. He called her aunt, whatever.
Yeah.
But she was kind of one of the big links to the CIA, and so she got killed. So I'm not sure what the status of that whole deal is within the government, but they haven't really shown it. I don't think it's intended to be part of the mix as far as how things will go down at the end.
By the way, the ratings have started coming in on IMDb, and this is the worst rated episode of the season. So people are disappointed. Most of the complaints are, I'm very worried of what they're setting up for the finale. So there's a lot of, concern trolling here, which might be, they might not be judging the quality of the episode itself. I do have to agree that, like, as a penultimate episode, I don't know what the stakes are for the finale, which I do feel like you would know by this point, traditionally, when you're watching a show. I mean, I'm not judging whether that's a good move or bad. I'm just saying that at this point, it's usually like when you get to that this late in the game, you kind of know what the stakes are for the finale, like going in, so that you kind of like are anticipating what those stakes are. I honestly don't know what the stakes are at this moment, other than like Homelander's in power, and Kimiko might have this power or not. I think it's
on near certainty that she has the power. I mean, Sage,
I agree. I'm just saying that they haven't like announced that explicitly, but I do agree.
Yeah. So I feel like we've got, Homelander's pushed it to the point of banning nut milks and abolishing Congress and, smashing the president's head in and
but banning the nut milk is really sticking in your craw.
Yeah. Well, how dare? Yeah. I mean, I've got some oat milk in the fridge.
What if you're lactose intolerant, for God's sake?
Right. But so he's pushing everything to the limit, trying to execute common folk that don't completely buy into his whole godhood unconditionally, and then we've cooked up potential solver for it, and I don't know. I feel like we're set up. I feel like we're ready to go.
Yeah, we'll know more next week. I'm going to go check out this. I'm rooting for the Cavs here to see if.
Oh, okay, right on.
You're in Timberwolves. We can see what happens tomorrow.
Yeah, it's we're probably cooked. I mean, 3-1. It's not looking good. Or not? No, sorry, not 3-2. 3-1.
2-2.
No, it's
3-2. 3-2. I'm sorry, 3-2.
3-2. Yeah. But we'll see. You got to just win the home game at Target Center and tie it up, and then if they can manage that, I mean, one game at a time is a horrible cliche, but it really
that's all you can do.
Yeah, and I mean, you can at least say, hey, we can win one at home, and then it'll be tied, and then who knows what can happen in Game 7. But I mean, Wemby is just, I sometimes feel like he needs to be like, we need a Harrison Bergeron solve for this, where he has to wear extra weights or goggles or headphones that distract him or something. He's too good for the rest of the league, if you ask me.
Yeah, it's gonna be tough. But yeah, like you said, one game at a time. What else can you do?
Yeah.
All right, I'm rooting for the Cavs, so maybe be easier series, but we'll see.
Yeah.
All right, Alan, thank you again for the conversation.
Yeah.
And we got one more episode of The Boys. Then we go back to Nolan. We'll be talking about The Prestige. And then The Dark Knight. We're back into comic book world after that.
That sounds good.
All coming up.
And I want to give a shout out to Paul Wallace for his very nice words on the Patreon. And that's a little plug for the Patreon as well. We're starting.
Oh yeah, the Patreon. Yeah. Oh, by the way, I should have shouted that out. Maybe I'll put this at the top of the episode as well, because I'm recording a section on Widow's Bay. That the rest of this conversation, rest of all of these episodes we've discussed, two conversations split into 3 episodes on the Patreon currently, all about the boys, Al and I discussing the show up until this point. So do check that out if you want to hear more of our conversation. And also, we've been talking about the Nolan rewatch there as well.
Yeah.
Oh, and speaking specifically about Paul, he's been a fan of the show, our podcast. He's been, I think, emailing me all the way back when we covered the Mayor of Easttown, which is like the first TV show we covered. We were doing music before then. The first TV show we ever covered on a podcast. So he has been on board forever, awesome. And he's been so important to the podcast. By the way, I've occasionally published an episode where the audio volume is too low, or I published an episode where only 2 minutes of the episode published.
Oh, so easy.
And he emailed me right away, and I was like, "Oh my god, thank God you told me." Saved me.
Well, now I feel even more pleased that he wasn't just like, "Oh, who's this new guy?" And this is ruining everything. So, thanks, Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Always. All right, thank you, Alan, and we'll pick it up from there next week. We'll see how it goes. We'll see how satisfying this finale is.
Sounds good. It'll either be I get to be right, or I get to be happy for you for being right, and we'll
or somewhere in between, depending if I'm wrong, and we'll still talk about how satisfying it is.
Yeah. Hopefully you can still appreciate it even if you're totally wrong.
Oh no, I would prefer to be wrong. I'd like to be surprised.
Okay.
If I'm completely wrong, if they just in general, by the way, when I'm predicting things, if I don't want to be right, is what it comes down to. If
I think it's just too predictable or something.
Yeah, exactly. If they come up with something that I find to be more satisfying and unexpected, then that's great. I mean, that's what I go to movies for. I want to be surprised, right? So, I mean, by the way, I love films like that like kind of, you see a movie, it's a genre movie, and it's taking you like very intentionally, it's holding your hand and being like cliche, but it's executing at a high level. And I'm like, this is fun. Right. I see what you're doing. And then you're like, and I know exactly where we're headed. And then they take me off another side road. I'm like, where are we now? I didn't even expect to end up here. I love that. So,
yeah. Me too.
So we'll see. We'll see if we have that experience. I do hope so. I always hope.
Yeah. The next time we talk about this show, we will know.
We will know. Exactly. We'll know ahead of time because the spoilers will all be out after the movie premiere. But I will try not to read any spoilers before.
Yeah. Well, I'm an old practice hand at this since I avoid trailers and all kinds of stuff. So
don't read the news at all. Avoid all headlines related to the boys.
Yeah.
All right, and we'll know all of it by next week.
Yeah, we'll be able to pontificate away on the meaning of it all.
That's true. All right, Alan. Thanks.
Thank you.
Go Timberwolves.
Go Z-Wolves and go Cavs. Right. See ya.